Good evening. Call this meeting of the Round Rock Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. It's Thursday, September 26, 2019. It's 5:30 p.m. We do have a quorum, and we are going. Not Miss Feller will not be here. I'm not sure about Miss Gonzalez. So just for an FYI of anybody who might be watching, we're going to go into closed session. We've got some agenda items, and I'm going to read these off real quick. And but we'll come back out after we're finished, and then we'll go and do the pledge, and then we'll do the first reading. And that technically we could start that at 6:30, but we may not be done by then. So if we are started at that point, that's just for information. So pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071 and 551.076, the board will meet to discuss and deliberate the district and board safety and security measures and legal issues, and also the HSU equity litigation on the HSU equity litigation on Mendoza. This is 551.074 regarding the Chapter 21 term employment contract for high school teacher coach. And then 551.072, the board will meet to discuss and deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. And pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, the board may seek legal advice regarding the proposed conveyance or sale of land. And then number 6, 551.074, deliberate duties, roles, and responsibilities of public officer and employees. Okay, with that, it is 5:32, and we're going into closed session. Good evening. Call this meeting back to order. The open session, the Round Rock Independent School District Board of Trustees, Thursday, September 26, 2019. If we would all call back to order, we are back to order. We all rise for the pledge, both pledges. Are there any kids in the audience who would like to lead us in the pledge? There are. Have them come forward. Anybody there? All right. Otherwise, okay. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
All right, board members, do we have any motions coming out of closed session? There's a couple,
I move
right?
that the Board of Trustees approve waiving service of process in the litigation Mendoza as discussed in closed session.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second that the board approve the waiving of service process for Mendoza as discussed in closed session. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Anything else?
6.
Mr. Moses?
6-0, as Amber's not here.
I'm sorry, 6. You're sorry. You're right. Sorry.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the resolution for the negotiation and subsequent land purchase as discussed in closed session.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for the board to accept the administration's recommendation to approve the resolution and negotiation subsequent land purchase as discussed in closed session. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 6-0. All right, thank you. Anything else?
I move that the Board of Trustees accept the administration's recommendation and issue notice of proposed non-renewal of Chapter 21 term employment contract to Daniel Pecos McDaniel as listed and discussed in closed session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the non-renewal of Chapter 21 term employment for Daniel Pecos McDaniel as listed and discussed in closed session. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Anything else? I think that's it. All right. With that, we'll go to agenda item E, public hearing, Round Rock ISD's 2018-2019 School Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas First Rating. With that, Dr. Flores.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, and also the community. Continuing on a long history of great financial footing, and also the district and the boards, previous boards and this board, continue to be great stewards of our district's resources and financial dollars. So without further ado, we have our CFO, Dr. Addix.
Thank you. Good evening, President Chadwell, members of the board, and Dr. Flores. As Dr. Flores said, I'm going to present the first report, which is an acronym that stands for the Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. And even though it's the 18-19 report, it's for the prior year of the 2017-18 results. And to kind of start with where it ends up, the rating is over a 100-point scale, and just so that you know, we scored 100 out of 100, so we scored as good as you can do. And I'll go over each of the 14 indicators that were part of the scoring piece, starting with indicator 1. You've got to file the annual financial report on time. We filed it a month before it was due, so there was no issue there. Then they look at whether there was an unmodified opinion in the annual report. Basically, was the opinion clean, that there were no findings or anything like that. So we had a clean financial report for that year of 17-18, and there were no disclosures of any material weaknesses in internal controls, so we passed that test. Then third, in terms of was the district in compliance with the payments of debt? We were, as the board knows, we make semi-annual bond payments. One is on February 1st, the other is on August 1st each year, and so we made those payments. Then the fourth indicator was the district making timely payments to the teacher retirement system, Workforce Commission, the IRS, and other government agencies, and we did all of those things as made timely payments. Then this indicator is actually no longer used, so it's just there to let you know that indicator 5 isn't used anymore. Then in terms of our cash on hand, which is something the district has an extremely strong cash balance at, you see that the cash in the general fund at the end of 2000, on 6/30/2018, we had $180,000 in cash, another $79 million of investments in the general fund, so that gave us $259 million. And so on an operating basis, we had significantly more cash than what the requirement is to get the maximum point score on that indicator. Then in terms of our current assets, this is a look at our balance sheet, basically our current assets versus current liabilities. That ratio was very strong at 3.47. To get maximum points, that ratio's got to be greater than 3. So we scored very strong on indicator 7. Our tightest indicator, and we got full points for this one, but it's the long-term liabilities to total asset. So our ratio is 0.594. You've got to be under a 0.6 in order to get full credit. That was the one indicator in the previous, like in last year's first report. This was the only indicator that we slightly missed. So we scored a 98 last year. This was the one indicator that was slightly over the 0.6. So anyway, just kind of some history there. In terms of indicator 9, this is a situation where since our expenditures exceeded revenue for that fiscal year, the other piece to get the maximum score is they look at what your cash on hand is. Is it greater than 60 days? Well, we're at 232 days, so we're significantly greater than the requirement for that indicator. Then our debt service coverage ratio is also met the requirement. We were at over a 1.9. The threshold to get maximum points is a 1.2, so we did fine on indicator 10. Indicator 11 looks at the administrative cost ratio. We're at 4.8. To get total points for a district greater than 10,000, we're at 51,000 students right now. The administrative cost ratio threshold to get maximum points is 8.55, so we were significantly under that. Indicator 12, did the school district not have a decline of 15% in the students to staff ratio? We didn't. Our decline was a little over, it was about 2.56%, so we were well within that requirement. On indicator 13, which basically just looks at what's the difference between the data that's submitted to PEIMS, which PEIMS is the acronym for Public Education Information Management System, and so what's the difference between the data that gets submitted to PEIMS versus what's in our annual financial report? So they want that to be within 3%. Well, so you're taking $506 worth of difference divided by $414 million. That's significantly less than 3%. It's got a whole lot of zeros before your first number to the right of the decimal place there. Then indicator 14, was it free of any material noncompliance for grants, contracts, and laws related to local, state, and federal funds? It was. And then in terms of 15, did the district not receive any adjusted repayment schedule? We've never had that, and so we're fine there. And so that was everything that was in part of our point total piece. So the total possible points was 100. We scored 100, so our overall grade was superior achievement. As a little backdrop, since the origination of this system of looking at it in the first report, which dates back to the early 2000s, the district has scored superior achievement in every one of those years. So the district got a lot to be proud of. That has we've got a long-standing history from a district leadership standpoint and from a financial management standpoint, that the district has, like I said, from the beginning of this look, has always scored superior achievement. So have a proud legacy to be thankful for and to look to continue. Next is some additional reporting requirements. They ask that we show what the board and superintendent expenses were for travel, et cetera, as you see detailed out there. So each of the board members that served during this past fiscal year, as well as Dr. Flores, that those expenses are laid out there. They overall totaled across all of the board members and Dr. Flores at $20,474 for the year. Then another ask is, were there any business transactions between the school district and board members? There were none. And then the final requirement is simply that the superintendent contract is made available, and so that's the link to get to the superintendent contract that's permanently on the district's website. So with that, that's a quick overview, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Board members, any questions? If they're while they're waiting, or if there's any, I just want to say thank you for the continued support on that. This every year, it's always good to see this. I think it shows that the district does a great, excellent job, superior job managing the taxpayer funds, and it's been that way for years. Thanks to Randy, Ramiro, and yourself. So please continue the good work. We are responsible for all the funds and the fiduciary responsibility for the students, staff, and the community members. And it's all 3 years critically important. So thank you for your work.
Thank you all.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Audix. All right. So that concludes the first hearing agenda, the financial integrity rating system hearing. So with that, we will go directly into agenda item F, adoption of minutes. I think there's a slight revision. It's in your notebook. It's the goldenrod colored here, so just everybody has that. Otherwise, I can take the minutes as they are.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the minutes from the board meeting held on August 15, 22nd, 29, 30th, and September 9, 2019 as revised.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the minutes August 15th, 22nd, 29th, 30th, and September 9th, 2019 as revised. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. All right, we'll go to agenda item G, public communications. At each monthly regular board meeting, the board will afford members of the public who sign up during the designated time an opportunity to speak to the board on items listed or not listed on the board agenda. I think we have 7 or 8 that are not listed, and I'm going to read this script real quick. I think most everybody knows it, but after our last meeting, I'm going to emphasize this. At each regular meeting, the board will set aside 20 minutes to afford the general public an opportunity to speak to the board regarding matters of concern or interest to the district, other than the character of any student, staff, or board member. Concerns or complaints regarding specific individuals should not be raised in public forum. They should be considered separately according to applicable board policies. The board requests that comments on any subject, whether positive or negative, be courteous and respectful. At the time the 20 20-minute limit is reached, the board will proceed to other business, and persons who have not yet spoken will be rescheduled to the latter part of the meeting in the public communication section. I'd like to remind the audience and the viewers that the comments of the speakers reflect their own positions and opinions. The board may not discuss and cannot discuss or act upon any matter that is not listed under the action item portion of the agenda. Therefore, board members cannot discuss the comments of speakers. Please understand that a lack of response from board members does not indicate agreement or approval of the comments. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the board. A spokesperson for a group will be allowed 5 minutes to make a presentation. Ms. Gonzalez, Vice President, will be the timekeeper. The time is also on the dais or on the podium there, so if you would please respect that time. So with that, our first speaker will be Molly Pollard. And after that will be Mr. Schmidt. So, Ms. Pollard, 3 minutes, unless you're representing a group. Okay.
Hi, my name is Molly, and I'm in 4th grade from Wells Branch Elementary Arts Integration Academy. I want to tell you about styrofoam trays. I've been trying to make a change in our tray system since 1st grade, but unfortunately, you can tell I haven't had any luck. Styrofoam trays may be easy to get and use, but you're probably using a lot more money than you would if you just washed normal trays. It might be super hard to wash plastic things every day, but styrofoam is bad for the environment because it doesn't break down easily, and some of it floats into the ocean and contributes to the island of trash. Soon our whole ocean will become an island of trash. It can also make the world too hot to live in if we keep polluting, or we'll have to wreck all of our homes so we can have space for more landfills, and then the whole world will end, literally. That's why you should reduce the amount of styrofoam you use. Thank you for listening to my speech. Bye.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Pollard. Excellent. All right. Mr. Schmidt.
Good evening, President Chadwell and board members. On Tuesday morning, I spoke at the Commissioner's Court. My remarks were recorded and available on the court's website, agenda item number 35. This item was to continue the SRO program through the 2021 school year. In the past, all public comments to the court were scheduled at the beginning of the meeting. This Tuesday, they implemented a new policy. You spoke to an agenda item at the time it was being discussed. One unique twist is the court asked you to remain at the podium and answer questions. This process allows the people's voice to be heard. I want to share a few of my remarks. Any agreement between the county and school district should be revenue neutral. The school district should cover the cost of all the officers. The district should pay for all necessary equipment, including patrol vehicles and maintenance. The county should benefit by having these additional resources available, especially during the summer when crime tends to increase. I do not want drugs in our schools. I'm in favor of the district paying the full cost of an additional K-9 unit for the Sheriff's Department. Drugs are not a disciplinary matter. They are a law enforcement matter. If this K-9 unit can be served as a detractor, I'm all for it. I do not want to see the Sheriff's Office involved in school disciplinary matters. Violations of school district policy need to be dealt with by the school or district, not law enforcement. The Williamson County Sheriff's Office is one of the finest in the country, and I want my kids protected by the best. And that happens when we continue this partnership. The court voted 5-0 to continue this relationship through the 2021 school year, but some comments from the dais bothered me. I want to address some of those now. The ISD, the Independent School District, is an independent entity whose purpose is primary and secondary education. It is governed by an elected board responsible to the electorate. The county sheriff has the responsibility of safety and security of everyone within his or her jurisdiction. The city police department has the responsibility of safety and security of everyone within their jurisdiction. I want to use this forum to share with the county judge, county commissioners, the Round Rock city mayor, and the Round Rock police chief that with or without a continued SRO program, those responsibilities don't change. A continued long-term partnership that is revenue neutral is the best interest for all parties. The school district's responsibility is education, not law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Next up will be Gene McNulty, and after that will be Tara Fisher Munoz.
All right. Esteemed trustees, Superintendent Flores, Round Rock ISD staff, and fellow community members, I'm Janine McNulty, representing Round Rock ISD Voices for a Sustainable Future. Formed in May of this year, we are a growing group of nearly 300 Round Rock ISD parents, students, employees, and community members. Our group's purpose is to prioritize the adoption of a modern, district-wide environmental sustainability policy that will build sustainability into operations and education throughout Round Rock ISD. Our initial priorities include the elimination of styrofoam lunch trays, a comprehensive and measurable district waste reduction plan, an evaluation of all district rooftops for solar. We feel strongly that the district can and should pursue these goals, and we invite the Board of Trustees to engage with us in this important conversation. Here's why. As the 21st largest district in Texas, Round Rock ISD has a responsibility to reduce the impact of its operations on the environment. 2, a well-executed waste reduction plan can save the district money in the form of reduced disposal and utility bills and proceeds from saleable recyclable materials. And our district's rooftops can cut electric costs by generating carbon-free solar energy. Building sustainability into our schools offers excellent educational opportunities for our students in a field that will only grow as the demand for solutions to the world's environmental problems grow. When we ignore sustainability in our school environments, it creates a disconnect that is felt by students, teachers, and the community. It undermines instruction and morale. We need to practice what we teach. Assuming that all our schools use styrofoam trays and supposing that only the 12,653 economically disadvantaged students in our district eat breakfast and lunch at school each day, we are responsible for 5.5 million trays every school year. The actual numbers are likely far larger. Styrofoam trays are toxic, they cannot be recycled, and they don't decompose. It's a top polluter of our waterways, eventually finding its way into our food and water supply as toxic microplastic. The environmental and health impacts from climate change affect economically disadvantaged communities and communities of color disproportionately. If we are serious about equity, then we must be serious about our sustainability practices. And without a robust sustainability policy at the district level, campus-driven sustainability initiatives are stunted rather than grown and propagated due to a lack of support at the district operational level. Do I get 5 minutes since I'm talking?
Do you have a group with
I am.
you? You raise your hand, your group? Okay.
Thank you. The last point I'd like to make is that our initial priorities are far more are absolutely achievable. AISD and ACC have fantastic sustainability programs, and they're eager to share their experience. And there are groups locally and nationally that partner with schools. And there are grants and matching funds available from both public and private resources to help offset our costs. So while we realize there is not a one-size-fits-all solution, there is absolutely a roadmap, there are models, there are mentors, and there are resources. Round Rock ISD Voices for a Sustainable Future respectfully asks the board to consider the formation of a standing advisory committee on sustainability, similar to what AISD has used to guide its sustainability efforts. Comprised of members of the community, students, employees, resource organizations, and mentors, the committee would work to develop sound policy, priority, and process recommendations to bring about improved sustainability throughout Round Rock ISD. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you. And I just realized you're with the group, but one group gets 5 minutes, so each speaker gets 3 minutes. So I think there's another speaker. Is that right, with the same group? Ms. Munoz, so if you could keep it to 3 minutes, please. All right, thank you.
Hello, I'm Tara Fisher Munoz, and I'm a parent, part of the Parent-Teacher Association with Wells Branch Elementary and Deer Park Middle School, and I'm also a sub with Round Rock ISD. I want to talk about two things to help bring sustainability to our schools. One is a composting program in the cafeteria. So in 2012, we got 900 signatures for the cafeteria composting program. Round Rock ISD initiated that program at 4 different schools. So that program was between 2013 and 2015. And then in 2015, Round Rock ISD decided to cancel the program due to the cost. So we feel passionately that teaching sustainability and conservation is extremely important as part of delivering a world-class education. The composting program did and would help demonstrate our commitment to sustainability and to teach our students how their individual actions impact the larger communities and systems of the world. For about the cost of one field trip, one grade level in elementary school, we can act responsibly and provide our students with this important hands-on lesson in conservation and global interdependence every school day for an entire year. The students and staff at Wells Branch Elementary, when we had the program, became very familiar with it, and they knew how to use it. They knew that was necessary to reduce our solid waste and its economic and ecological benefits. We would like to know when Round Rock ISD is doing another bid out for garbage and recycling, and if they can, we urge you to include pricing for a composting program. If Round Rock ISD opted to use paper or carton trays instead of styrofoam and compostable utensils, the entire school-provided lunch would be able to go in the compost, decreasing the need for garbage services in the cafeteria. And my second point is I would like Round Rock ISD to have plant-based options in the cafeteria. So we would like Round Rock ISD to provide at least one plant-based option each day in the cafeteria. Currently, there's one vegetarian option, but it's laden with dairy products, and a lot of people are not consuming dairy. Plant-based meals save water, reduce land use, and even lower greenhouse gas emissions. A Friends of the Earth study found that when Oakland Unified School District in California added more plant-based meals to its menus, the district reduced its carbon footprint by 14%, saved 42 million gallons of water, and $40,000 over the course of 2 years. It's my understanding that Austin ISD also provides a daily plant-based vegan option. And not only are the new lunch menus healthier and tastier, these new lunch options have a much lower carbon footprint. The animal agriculture industry is responsible for 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It also occupies 45% of arable land use and uses 23% of the world's fresh water. In fact, a Friends of the Earth study found that if every school district in the United States adopted this type of food policy, it would be equivalent by taking 150,000 cars off the road every year.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
All right. Next up will be Robert Ranko, and then after that will be Stephanie Martin.
Good evening, Mr. Superintendent and members of the board. My name is Robert Ranko. I'm a resident of Round Rock. I've lived in Williamson County since 2001, and I'm here to talk about the native mascot issue that has come to light in Round Rock recently, but actually it's been around for a long time. I'm a Penobscot. My family and I grew up in Maine, and I grew up just in the shadows of our reservation, Indian Island, Maine. My uncle was a former tribal chief, and I've lived in Central Texas for the better part of 25 years. I want to dispel a couple of misconceptions, I think. One is that this is somehow a new issue. It's not. My college, Dartmouth College, disposed of its Indian mascot in 1973. The town next to mine, where the reservation is located, Old Town, Maine, disposed of its Indian mascot about 20 years ago. They're now the Coyotes. I attended my first forum on the abolition of native mascots in 1999. The idea that somehow we're just now worried about it is simply untrue. But, much like slavery, integration, interracial marriage, apparently Texas is going to be amongst the last to get on board. You know, the Maine legislature recently abolished the use of native mascots by state statute. And those who support keeping the mascot and these sorts of mascots, like we have at Double File Trail and at Westwood. By the way, there's a sign out there. It says, "Wipe out the Warriors." Round Rock High School, just tonight, is invoking genocide to get folks excited about the big game against Westwood. Think about that for a moment. The folks who are interested in keeping the mascot have gone to great lengths to find anecdotal evidence from folks around the country to say, well, they support keeping these mascots. I assure you, that sort of support is anecdotal. Virtually every tribe I'm aware of, every group I'm aware of, every Native group has come out against the perpetuation of these mascots. And this is another misconception, this isn't about us being offended. It's not about being offended. These are harmful. There are various sociological and anthropological studies that have found that these are harmful to natives psychologically, educationally, socially, in a variety of ways. There's a lot of social science behind this if you'll look at it. So, I have to move along. Why is this only done with natives? We don't have other racial groups that are represented through mascots. We don't have pictures of little black boys on sweaters, and we call them the sprinters, because black folks are fast. We don't have little Asian boys on sweaters that say, and we call them the mathletes because Asians are good at math. But we do have a little Indian caricature on a sweater, and we call them the Braves because supposedly Indians are really brave. What were they brave in the face of? They were brave in the face of genocide and displacement, and they lost. And they're not here because of that.
Thank you, Mr. Ranko.
And it's disgusting that we would co-opt them like that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Thank you. Next up will be Stephanie Martin, and after that will be Megan Sita. That'll be our last speaker for this.
Good evening. After 10 years of service to the district, I resigned my position at Early College High School last May. Out of a staff of 16, I was one of 4 who left. I'm here now because I still care about my students there. Last year, I sponsored the Black Student Union because there were no black teachers on staff. Soon, I witnessed racism and bigotry on campus. At a BSU community meeting, I watched the principal yell at kids and parents, dismissing their concerns. It was unkind and unprofessional. Later, she remarked that she would like to, quote, spank that black bee, she didn't say bee, about a parent who had raised a concern in the meeting the night before. When I asked if our BSU could visit the historically black University Prairie View A&M, she said, quote, why would you want to take them to that nasty place? Unquote. All of our college visits on campus had been to predominantly white institutions. There's more. In my first year, a colleague shared she frequently heard the principal refer to a black employee by the N-word. The following are things I've personally heard her say. If I shared everything, it would take far longer than I'm allotted here. Quote, immigrants don't teach their kids how to behave. Quote, we need to wean SPED and 504 kids off of their accommodations. Quote, ADHD kids just need to exercise. To staff, quote, if you're gay, don't put anything about it on social media. I can't protect you if you do. I filed a Lighthouse report, but nothing changed. Students continued to lose accommodations and access to a special education teacher. Trans students continued to complain that she used their non-preferred names. This is called dead naming. Spot on if you read a recent study by the University of Texas that shows calling trans students by their chosen names decreases their suicide risk by 65%. A trans student continued to be told to use the faculty women's restroom contrary to his gender identity. A coworker filed a grievance with our Stony Point area superintendent. Myself and other coworkers were listed as also having been harassed by the principal. Everyone listed was interviewed by the Stony Point area superintendent except me. They came back feeling gaslighted and intimidated. The complainant quit before the school year ended. Nothing changed. At Early College High School, we trusted you. Proper channels were followed. Still, the principal remains at the expense of the entire learning community. He failed us last year. So I'm not asking for help anymore. I'm telling you as a community member, a special education parent, and a voter, clean your house.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Next up, our last speaker will be Megan Sita. Is that right?
I had to fill out the form to speak.
We didn't make it in time, I guess? No, I wasn't here. Oh, it's later. Oh, it's a topic later on? If it's subject on the agenda for later, then thank you.
Good evening. I'm an elementary school dual language teacher at WBE AIA. I would be at home resting and prepping for tomorrow, but I'm here public speaking, which ranks close to going to the dentist for me. So, because this is so important, I'm here to talk about waste reduction and what we can do as a community to streamline our recycling and our waste reduction efforts. As educators, we are in the business of preparing students for the future. Aren't we then responsible to protect their future and make sure they have a future on this planet? Did you know that currently our recycling gets thrown into the trash? Students and teachers are unclear what materials we can recycle because we don't have any marked signage or receptacles that are marked. And there's no oversight of the recycling program, so it gets dumped into the trash for convenience. We need a streamlined program, custodial staff education, and oversight. This seems like an area that we can tackle without spending additional money. As part of the curriculum, we teach our students about the importance of conservation, reducing, and reusing resources. When we teach students about this, I notice that student engagement is sky high. They can sense the truth and the severity of the situation. And they wonder that if it's so important, then how come our adults are not taking it as seriously? When we go into the cafeterias, why are we using these single-use, environmentally toxic styrofoam trays? It's bad for student and staff morale, and we really need to take our planet's limited resources and limited space for landfills very seriously. And Austin ISD has already eliminated the use of these trays. We can find out what they're doing and emulate it. We can purchase materials wholesale with them to cut down on the costs, and it's time for us to follow suit and communicate to students and staff that our health and environment is a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ida. Board members, we have two more speakers. One of them has to do with safety and security, and it's on the consent agenda, so let it speak, and the other one is not listed. Is that all right? Two more speakers? All right. So with that, next speaker will be Jen Price, and then after that will be Ms. Royce. Royce.
Hi, my name is Jen Price, and I'm a mom of 3 in elementary school here. I'm here to ask you to oppose any of the alternative safety options that were presented by the task force that would arm teachers and school staff and ask you not to consider the school marshal or guardian program. We should not enable anyone other than extremely highly trained law enforcement to be armed with a firearm on school campuses. I watched the Safety and Security Task Force presentation from home, and I'd like to point out that there was one inaccuracy when they claimed that school marshals was just like having law enforcement officers on campus each day and that they had the powers of a police officer. That's not true. School marshals are not law enforcement. They are only allowed to act as such as peace officers in a deadly force incident. Therefore, they add no benefit of added law enforcement on campus. The Guardian program requires no training. School marshal requires only 80 hours. This hardly compares to the more than 640 hours required by TCOL for commissioned peace officers. And the basic training that Williamson County Sheriff's Department goes through is almost twice as much as TCOL. Having anyone besides highly trained law enforcement officers armed on campus would only increase risk for students, staff members, and any responding law enforcement. Round Rock ISD cannot be compared to the districts in Texas that have chosen these programs that arm teachers. Those districts are usually very rural. They have an average enrollment of 1,500 students, and most of them have under 600 students. Clearly, they're not examples that we should be looking to. The Texas State Teachers Association opposes arming teachers, as does the American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, Texas School Districts Police Chief Association, and the National Association of School Resource Officers. Furthermore, with the problems that have been brought to light with the disproportionate rates of discipline in this district for Black students and for those who are economically disadvantaged or receiving special education services, why would we allow anyone in charge of discipline to be armed with a gun? What kind of message would that be sending to those groups of students? There are things we can do that are preventative and not reactionary, like the recommendations for behavioral health and education and training for staff But also, we could be promoting the importance of responsible gun storage at homes. Most of the kids who bring in a gun to carry out a school shooting, they get it from home. It's left accessible to them. With every one of these threats, we're missing the opportunity to remind parents of responsible gun ownership. If they can't get the gun, they cannot bring it to school. So I'd like to ask you to consider options that will actually benefit our community and not consider options like school marshals or the Guardian program, which arm teachers and would only add risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Next up will be Paula Royas.
Good evening, Dr. Flores, President Chadwell, and the Board of Trustees. This is my second time to the podium speaking about dyslexia. I'm speaking as a mother of a 7-year-old dyslexic son and a proud member of the Round Rock Dyslexia Group. And I said I wouldn't get choked up. So I wanted to speak on my journey with the special education with the district. My son entered the special education through the PPCD program for speech and articulation delays. A year and a half passed before I found out about a program that the district offered for speech and articulation. We had our play-based full evaluation at the age of 3, and he was due another one at the end of last February when he was 6. His kindergarten teacher alerted us to showing signs of dyslexia. A screening was ordered, and we was identified as being dyslexic. I did not realize the screening would stop all other screenings I was concerned about when I did not disagree with the findings of dyslexia. I was happy to receive the dyslexia diagnosis so I could begin those services. Knowing what I know now, I wish I would have challenged that. As parents, we trust in the schools and the districts to do the right thing by the student, but this is far from the truth. Teachers are pulled to cover other positions instead of providing services. With my experience with dyslexia services, we missed half a year of services when our special education teacher was out on medical leave. My son saw substitute after substitute who is not qualified to teach the Wilson program. I began questioning his services, how the services were being met, and at that time, he was placed with a gen ed teacher the last week of school. There are a lot of special education teachers in the district teaching the Wilson program with just a 3-day introduction training. Wilson Language Training strongly recommends a 12-month training to be certified to teach such programs. 1 in 5 children are dyslexic. Where are they? The burden falls upon the parent to know and enforce educational laws, and I hope they are listening. I'm fortunate to be able to stay at home with my children, but it breaks my heart for the single parents and the families that are not fortunate to be able to attend the meetings to educate themselves. It doesn't have to be this hard. Our group has offered multiple times to form an advisory committee to walk with the district instead of against it. We are stronger together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. All right, that concludes our public comments. Everybody who spoke, I encourage you, if you have a text, anything that you read, you're welcome to send it to the Board of Trustees at Round Rock ISD so we can have that as reference for future items. With that, we'll go to agenda item H, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chadwell. We do have 3 items on tonight's superintendent report, and the first one is legislative update by Representative James Tellerico. And as he works his way to the podium, I just want to also recognize that he is a Wells Branch, a Deer Park Middle School, and a McNeil graduate. So,
that's right.
With that being said, and a former teacher, so a fierce champion for public education. I welcome Mr. James Tellerico.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. Thank you, President Chadwell and the Board of Trustees. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a new representative for House District 52. So for those that don't know me, I can give a little background on who I am, how I got here, and then overview what was accomplished in the session in terms of public education. And then I'd love to have your comments and questions after that. So I represent Southeast Williamson County, the cities of Round Rock, Hutto, Taylor, Copeland, and a little bit of Georgetown. Obviously, Round Rock ISD means a tremendous amount to me personally. I was born to 2 parents who didn't graduate from college, one who didn't finish high school. I was born at Round Rock Hospital on this very road, back when it was called Round Rock Hospital, and was in Round Rock ISD from my first day of kindergarten to my high school graduation. One of the luckiest things that ever happened in my life was getting assigned to Mary Beth Cordone in kindergarten, who I think is recognized by many of us as one of the best kindergarten teachers we've had in this district. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And I have no doubt that I wouldn't stand here in front of you as your state representative if it hadn't been for her and the countless selfless educators in this district. After I graduated from the University of Texas, decided I wanted to pay that favor back and decided to become a public school teacher myself. Moved all my stuff down to the west side of San Antonio, a beautiful, historic Mexican-American neighborhood and one of the poorest zip codes in our state. And I met students, many of whom faced many, many more challenges than I faced as a student. And I met 11 and 12-year-olds in the 21st century in the state of Texas who couldn't read and write. And decided in that moment that that's what I wanted to devote my life to writing and to fixing. And I became an education nonprofit leader, serving students here in Round Rock ISD. I think I saw Dr. Eflin here. Back when she was principal of Robertson Elementary, worked with her to provide educational software to our youngest students in pre-K and kindergarten, teaching them algebraic thinking before they could even read and write. Our work caught the attention of Governor Greg Abbott, who I hosted along with Dr. Eflin at Robertson, and those conversations eventually led to the creation of a statewide program called Math Innovation Zones, which is helping to provide resources for schools across the state to experiment with new curriculum, new software in STEM subjects. And then when my predecessor, Larry Gonzalez, decided to spend more time with his family, I decided to run for this seat. Primarily because I believe we don't have enough educators at the state capitol making decisions about education policy. If you're going to fix school finance, it's probably a good idea to have a teacher or two at the table to help in that process. Nothing against my lawyer and doctor friends, but they are overrepresented at our state capitol. So I was really proud to provide my perspective, both as a public school student here in Round Rock, but also as an educator in Texas public schools. This session was really a landmark session for public education, as many of you already know. And my first week on the job, I was still trying to find where the bathrooms were at the Capitol and figure out, where I was going to eat at lunch, like most freshmen. But I was also assigned to the Public Education Committee, one of the most high-profile committees at the state legislature, and was thrown into helping fix our school finance system. So it was certainly baptism by fire for me as a freshman legislator. I really credit our Republican Speaker, Dennis Bonnen, for putting a practitioner on the Public Education Committee, despite our differences in terms of party or ideology, because he believed we really need to put kids before politics and really have experts at the table when we're trying to fix a problem as complex as school finance. I was really proud of the work we did with House Bill 3, and I can provide a little bit of an overview. I know many of you are familiar with the basic structure of the bill, but for those that aren't, it's an $11.6 billion infusion into our state's public education system. $5.1 billion of that 11.6 is going to property tax relief. I know y'all hear from constituents every day about the rising property taxes in our community, and folks who are getting pushed out of their homes and having to leave a house they've lived in for 20, 30 years because they can't afford to live there anymore. And so that $5.1 billion is going to go to help buy down school district property tax rates across the state, about 8 cents on average in the first year, 13 cents on average in the second year. It won't fix all our property tax problems, but I think it's a good, thoughtful step forward in providing true relief. There were other efforts at the Capitol to punish our our cities and our counties for their property tax increases. And as many of you know who have looked at your property tax bill, it's our school districts, because of a lack of state investment, who have had to increase property taxes the most. And so I was happy that House Bill 3 tackled that real problem head on and didn't engage in kind of the silly politics of handcuffing cities and localities. And then the $6.5 billion was the part of the bill I was most excited about, because it was going directly to districts and classrooms and teachers and kids. And so let me talk quickly about how we changed the formula itself, and then talk about how we used this new state funding to try to scale best practices in our educational system across the state. So there's an old joke at the Capitol that there are only 3 people in the entire state who understand our school finance formula, and 2 of them are dead. And so it's a very complex Byzantine system. I probably think Trustee Vessa is probably the closest person I know here who could really grapple with school finance. We talked a lot during the session, and her knowledge is impressive about the system. But it starts with a basic allotment, as all of you know, that is a per pupil amount that is kind of the beginning of the school finance formula. And that basic allotment will then get multiplied by first district characteristics, so whether you're a rural district or an urban district, and then get multiplied off of student characteristics. How many students do you have that are economically disadvantaged or English language learners or special education? And so what we did was, one, increase that basic allotment for every district across the state by almost $1,000 per student, which is a pretty significant investment in that part of the formula. And what that does is I always kind of compare it to a bucket, right? It's trying to figure out how much is each district entitled to, both in local funding and state funding. And of course, as all of you know, that bucket first gets filled with your local revenue. And if you overflow that bucket, the excess goes back to the state in terms of recapture or Robin Hood payments that are going to go to help districts that have less property wealth. By increasing that basic allotment, everybody's bucket across the state is bigger now, which means you get to keep more of your local revenue back home to serve the students and educators in your own community that need those resources. And then what we did was try to, one, update those district characteristics. So we eliminated something called the Cost of Education Index, which hadn't been updated since before I was born in the late 80s, and so was severely outdated, treated communities like Austin and Round Rock as small communities, treated Round Rock as a small town, and as all of us know, Round Rock looks a lot different than it did in 1987. And the consensus was that even if we updated that system, almost like when you buy a car, how it depreciates the moment you drive it off the lot, the second we ended the session, that cost of education index would be outdated again. So the thought was we eliminate that index in that part of the formula, put it into the basic allotment to provide more resources to local districts across the state. And then in the student characteristics, we decided to funnel state aid and state funding to the students who need it most. So we increased student weights for our students experiencing economic disadvantage, our English language learners. We tried to ensure that our state funding formula was appreciating the fact that it takes different resources to teach different students. And I was very proud of those efforts. And then the last thing that I was really excited about this bill was that instead of just providing more state aid, which was necessary if we were going to right this imbalance between state funding and local funding, which had gotten out of whack over the last decade, if we were going to do that, we might as well use that funding to incentivize changing our educational practices around the state. Because I'm a believer that our system needs much more resources than it has now. And we need a lot more funding if we're going to keep up with the national average. But I also believe that in addition to more funding, we have to change some of the practices in our classrooms that haven't provided any results throughout our state's history. And so both need to happen if we're going to succeed and we're going to improve student outcomes. And so we use that funding for a few different policy initiatives. One was, for the first time in Texas history, funding full-day pre-K for students across the state who were eligible for those services. As many of you know, we would fund half-day pre-K, and there was a time on the committee when my colleagues said that the only difference between half-day pre-K and full-day pre-K is a nap and recess. And as the educator on the committee, I was able to point out that from a child development perspective, play and recess and even naps are critical to a child's learning and child development at that young age. So it's not wasted time. It's actually really valuable time. So thankfully, folks came around and we were able to provide that funding for full-day pre-K. We also set aside funding for increases in teacher compensation, and I'm very proud of the decision that this board made to increase teacher pay. I heard it was the biggest increase in 20 years in Round Rock ISD, so I applaud you for making that decision to use those resources to support our educators. We also are incentivizing things like dual language, which, as all of you know, is kind of the gold standard for language acquisition. We have a dark history in the state of punishing students who spoke Spanish. Now we realize in an interdependent global economy, speaking two languages or three languages is a gift, and a very marketable gift at that. And so providing more funding to incentivize dual language, I think, will help our students who are developing their English and learning multiple languages. And then provided for the first time in state history a dedicated allotment to dyslexia services. I know I heard the concerns about 504 and having those students getting the services they need. So the idea is having that dedicated funding for dyslexia will be something that will truly help a lot of our students who need it most. There are a lot of concerns with the bill. It's a 300-page bill, and so it's not going to be perfect. As you all know, in the kind of sausage-making process at the Capitol, you give and take, and some things you don't like and some things you do like. I'll point out two concerns. One is the elimination of our gifted and talented allotment. I understand the mathematical reasoning behind it. If you take, because as you know, that allotment was capped at 5% for every district across the state, and every district was claiming that 5%, it was essentially just a flat payment we were giving to every district. It didn't work as an allotment or as a student weight. And so if every district was hitting that amount, the thought was, let's just put that allotment into the basic allotment, which would then get multiplied off of these different characteristics and end up earning more money for school districts. That made total mathematical sense. The problem I think a lot of advocates and parents had with that proposal is that when you eliminate dedicated funding for something like gifted and talented, the worry is districts around the state, when times get tough, which they inevitably do, the first thing that's going to get cut are gifted services for our gifted and talented students. And I'm a believer that gifted and talented students are a special needs population like any other special needs population. There's a misconception for those that aren't educators that gifted is a synonym for successful. And as all of you know, sometimes our gifted students are the ones that struggle the most in class. I remember when I was a teacher, some of my biggest behavior problems were my GT students. Sometimes a gift is not always a gift. And so those students need special services just like any other special needs population. So I regretted that addition to the bill. And then, of course, the biggest problem I have with House Bill 3 is the lack of sustainable revenue sources to maintain this investment that we've made. So we essentially paid for House Bill 3 out of our budget surplus. Times are good in Texas, and we had more money than we thought we were going to have. So we used this to create this school finance proposal, which is great. But the School Finance Commission had recommended that we better find some sustainable sources of revenue for when times aren't good, which we will of course face sooner rather than later if indicators are correct. And so there were proposals to close loopholes in our state budget, close sales tax loopholes, which are pretty common sense. But as many of you know, it's hard to get politicians to raise revenue. It's very easy to spend money. It's harder to raise money. Everybody wants to ride in the wagon. No one wants to pull it. And so I think if we're going to come back next session, that has to be priority number one, is figuring out how we're going to maintain this promise that we've made to you. For those that have been trustees or school district leaders for a long time, you may remember 2011 when the state of Texas had made some big promises and had made some investments in school districts. And then once times got tough after the Great Recession, we pulled those resources and you were left holding the bag. And so I could see that happening if we don't next session come back and make this a sustainable investment. The last thing I'll mention is, as an individual, that was my work in the Public Education Committee. I'm the only Central Texas representative or legislator on that committee. And so I tried to not only represent Round Rock and Hutto and Taylor, but also tried to look out for Austin ISD and Lockhart and Del Valley, Pflugerville, all the other districts in our region. I tried to be a voice for our entire Central Texas family and not just for House District 52. But it was a privilege to be on that committee because I got to look at the numbers before the rest of the body. And I always, when I got my spreadsheet runs on how the bill was looking, I always went to the R's and looked for Round Rock and made sure we were getting taken care of. I'm glad we were able to bring, I think the final number was $24 million back to Round Rock and eliminate our recapture payment for this year. I want to make sure we can maintain that over time, which I know is a concern of everyone in this room. But it's a big leap forward, and it's a great first step to improving public education around the state. As an individual legislator outside of that committee, I did some work on something I called the Whole Student Agenda, which was essentially an effort to fundamentally change how we treat our students in the state of Texas and hopefully serve them as full human beings and not just vessels to pour academic information into. As all of you know and everyone in this room knows, there's a lot more to raising a human being than reading, writing, and arithmetic. Yet our public education system hasn't reflected that fact. So we push bills to increase behavioral and mental health, to protect things like recess, to ensure that we have practical curricula like financial literacy, sex ed, civics, the things that are going to really ensure that our students are developing into full, healthy human beings that are ready for the world outside of their K through 12 experience. Some of those bills passed, some of them didn't, but I look forward to working on that same agenda in the coming session. And all of this all of this work is motivated by what I experienced in this school district. And I know we have big problems. I know we've talked about sustainability and equity and social justice, all the things that we still have work to do on. But I am so proud every single day that I get to represent this incredible school district at the state capitol. This district changed my life, and this is the least I could do to repay that debt. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you may have, or reflections or thoughts or concerns. I'll take these and take them back with me to the Capitol and continue to get back to work. So,
Guess who pushed the button first?
I would expect nothing less.
Well, yes, it was a great session. I enjoyed working with you. And for those who don't know, this was like what I ran on, what I worked really hard to accomplish in my first time in this office. And I felt very, very good about what the end result. Even though I would have liked to have seen us get more than the $24 million we got, I was still very happy with the overall bill. And I was just talking with someone today about how I worked in the legislature before, and it's not often that a bill comes out that's actually good policy. It's really, really hard to get that. Like, it's hard to go into the sausage machine and come out with actually something that will have a good result. And I truly believe that most of what is in HB3 was actually advancing good education in our state, which is not common. So this is a big deal, and I've tried to celebrate it as much as I can on this dais of how happy I was with it. I also talked to people a lot about how this session I felt was an easy session for me because there was so much momentum behind me, and how next session will be so much harder because we have redistricting and other priorities on the table, and a lot of people will feel like this issue has been solved, which in reality it hasn't.
That's right.
And so I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about, I mean, I certainly know some of the things, like, for example, the basic allotment going up again. And the reason why that has to happen is if we don't get more money, we can't give our teachers another raise.
That's right.
Like, we don't have any money right now to give them a raise for this next year. We certainly don't have enough money to give them a raise for the next biennium. But I just wanted to ask you, what other things do you think just have to happen this next session in order for us to keep this momentum going in the right direction?
First, I really appreciate you, Corey, for your advocacy at the state capitol during our public education committee hearings. Every time I had a Round Rock ISD official or student or parent testify, I was always so proud of how they were well prepared and passionate. I'm thinking of Amy Grosso and her advocacy there. I mean, every time this district made me so proud to be your representative. And I think my colleagues were tired of me bragging on Round Rock ISD and how well we did and carried ourselves at the state capitol. And I totally agree. Every legislative session needs to be a school finance session. The last major education bill before this one, I believe, was 1986 or 87, with Governor Mark White passing things like No Pass, No Play. And so that's a long time to go in between major education overhauls. We have to be better each session of taking a look at our system and figuring out what needs to change. A lot of my colleagues fought to try to attach the basic allotment to some kind of growth indicator, growing it with inflation or some other metric that would allow it to continue to rise each year. There was pushback from some folks who there tends to be a principle of not tying the hands of future legislatures. But a lot of us just felt like if we don't tie it to something, it'll just remain stagnant, and we'll be back in the exact same position that we found ourselves in this session. So I'd like to continue having that conversation. I also think the bill didn't do enough for equity across the state. We kind of essentially created a floor, but I'm very interested in how do we create a ceiling, because I think it's better when our state grows together and we don't have folks getting too far out in front of the rest of the state. So I'd love to explore those things in addition to sustainable source of revenue, GT, the other problems with the bill. But I'll need y'all's help to keep that fight up. Yes, President Chadwell.
I got a question. Thank you, Representative Tallarico. So thank you for your work on the Public Education Committee. I think it was great. Appreciate you reaching out to Round Rock as much as you did.
Of course.
And of course, bringing your experience there. My request going forward is keep up the good work, assuming you're back in there, and if not, just continue working with your colleagues who are doing that. But one of the things that does need to be fixed, and it was related to this, is property appraisals.
Yes, sir.
We're going to have a vote here in a few minutes on the appraisal board. I'm still on the appraisal board for Williamson County, but all across the state, commercial properties, as I know you're aware, get a huge loophole. They can reduce their property values.
That's right.
And guess where that funds then falls back on? It falls back on the homeowners and people who rent their properties.
That's exactly
so I
right.
encourage you, keep what you've done with House Bill 3 and the next legislation, work on property.
I appreciate those remarks, President Chadwell. And as you may know, we filed a bill to try to close that loophole in terms of property tax appraisals. Williamson County's appraisal district, I should say, is a model for the entire state. Our appraisal district does an excellent job in terms of transparency and explaining the process to the constituents in this county. And I talked with Larry Gaddis and a lot of folks about this problem. There is a concern in terms of, so there's I think a solution that could solve this problem. It's called sales price disclosure, where commercial industrial properties would report their sales prices publicly. Now, there's a concern about privacy and our state values, kind of privacy for businesses. So I proposed a compromise bill, which would have had the owners of those industrial commercial properties disclose their sales price confidentially directly to the appraisal district. And I felt that was a kind of a middle approach that would still satisfy, kind of my realtor lobby, and my business lobby, but also ensure that everyone is paying their fair share for our public education system, because homeowners benefit from a great public education system, but so do businesses and business owners. And if we all believe in this value of this system, we should all pay for it, and it shouldn't just be shouldered by homeowners. And that's more of an acute problem in places like Austin. Some of these skyscrapers down in downtown Austin are severely undervalued and are not paying their fair share. So
they put it in the paper that it was sold for $100 million, and they go turn around and protest it for $60 million. So that's $40 million off the appraisal of the tax roll. So,
and they have an army of lawyers to contest those, right? Like a homeowner doesn't have that. At least most homeowners don't have that. And so we have to even the playing field and ensure that we're all paying our fair share. I look forward to filing that bill again and hopefully getting a little more traction.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Well, you got them here. Put in your requests.
Your complaints. That's right.
Otherwise, I assume you're always available for phone call or email.
Of course. So. Absolutely. I try to be as accessible as possible. And I appreciate all of you being very transparent and forthcoming with information, help, advice. I know, Mason would text me throughout the session, check in on me, and make sure I was doing okay. And I really do appreciate. And Dr. Flores has, of course, been so helpful. So I just want to thank all of you for standing by me and supporting me through the whole process. But I was a middle school teacher, so I was ready for the drama at the state capitol and handled it well, I think. So, but anyway, Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Representative Talarico. All right, thank you very much. All right, next agenda item will be H2, Goal Progress Measures 5.3 CTE course enrollment and completion. Dr. Flores.
Yes, we'll have Ms. Mandy Estes take us through this item, and it's an exciting presentation by Sherry Bonds and Kathy Malerba. But Mandy Estes will get us started.
Hi, good evening, trustees. It is a pleasure tonight. This is our report to you on Goal Progress Measure 5.3. Now, of course, we know those aren't adopted yet, but we're trying to shift our updates to you to that model. So bear with us on that. We know we're a little ahead of that. But it is an exciting presentation for us because, as you know, in Round Rock, we try to make sure that all of our students are college ready, military ready, and workforce ready. And because we know that some of our kids who go to college need to also work and hold a good job in order to avoid the crippling college debt that some kids are starting to accumulate. And so it's very important to us. For the past year, or in the past year, our kids earned over 7,800 certifications. That's 7,800. Most of those are earned by high school kids, but not exclusively. And this was across 60 certification areas. So we're very proud of our program here in Round Rock ISD. Sherry has shared with me, because she keeps in touch with the other CTE directors across the area, that we're quite the envy of others in the area. So with that, I want to turn it over to Sherry, and she'll share some of the highlights with you. Great.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, President Chadwell, Board, and Dr. Flores for having me today. I'm excited to share. I'm going to sneak in a few highlights of CTE from the last year as we get into talking about industry-based certifications, or IBCs, as they're commonly referred to. And as Mandy said, we do know that this is a proposed goal or progress measure, but we want to go ahead and just give you some information as we go through this process. So what you'll see up in front of you is class of 2018. So we're actually going to go back a little bit further than last school year. We know that our data is always at least 1 year in the rear. So what you'll see here, high school students have the opportunity with our latest graduation plans to graduate with an endorsement. There are a variety of endorsements you can graduate with. Several are CTE endorsements. So you'll see that almost half, not quite exactly, but a large amount of our students actually graduate with a CTE endorsement. So that could range anywhere from business and finance to engineering, health science, and anything in between. So if you look, those students who actually are earning their CTE endorsement versus a non-CTE endorsement are 19% more likely to enroll direct to some version or some sort of college directly after high school. So that's the fall after their senior year. So we're very proud of that. I'm sure you could attribute that to many things, maybe a focus, maybe they found their passion in high school, maybe they crossed some things off that they don't want to do anymore. But we are excited to see such a high number of our students are going direct to college as they're finishing their CTE endorsements. When we talk about college and career readiness for our last years, so class of, or the school year 2018-19, our students earned over 88 credit hours at ACC through our articulated credit programs. These are not dual credit. This is workforce courses. So these are taught by our high school teachers. Students then pass an exam within our classes to prove the alignment between our courses and Austin Community College, and they have these courses waiting for them in escrow after they graduate. So it's an exciting opportunity for them to get a leg up, potentially in their career area, or just to demonstrate that they can be successful in college coursework to get them excited about whatever their next steps are. As Mandy mentioned, our students also earned over 7,800 certifications, and that's in secondary levels, and those are local and the IBCs, or that industry-based certifications that I mentioned. Industry-based certifications, those are ones that count toward accountability, and those are exams that we see predominantly in our areas more as a capstone exam within our programs of study. Our local certifications might happen at any point in the 4 years for our students, or even into middle school. But these are exams that help students begin to demonstrate readiness within a workforce area. A good example would be something like CPR. We actually offer 2 levels of CPR, once in their freshman year, again in junior year. Those students then can build on that and earn their certified medical assisting, certified nurse aide, pharmacy technician. So you can see sort of a progression. We definitely want all of our students to have CPR certification if they're going to go into the healthcare field. So it's just a way for them to build on their skills. And it's exciting to see how we've progressed. So in 16-17, we had 6,200 certifications. In 17-18 school year, almost 6,900. And then this last school year, we increased to 7,800 certifications. So that's really exciting to see. Of those 7,800 certifications, as I mentioned, there's local, and then there's IBC. Our locals were 6,200, 37, and then our industry-based certifications, we had almost 1,600 certifications. We have several students who will earn multiple certifications over their years, and we'll talk about that again in just a little bit. One last thing about our students, something that we pride ourselves in our career and technical education programs here in Round Rock, is their opportunity for leadership development. We know that we want our students to get out and have as many opportunities as they can in life, and we know how important leadership is with that. So developing leadership skills is something that we really focus on for our students. So last school year we had over 1,300 students that competed in career and tech student organizations, and that's at that first level. So that might be competing at their first HOSA event or going to their first FFA competition. But then from that, we had over 600 students competed at the state level, and then we had over 200 that advanced to national and international levels. So we're very proud of our students and all that they attain. We definitely have a standard of excellence. As Mandy said, we're proud of them, and it's nice to always hear other districts want to be like Round Rock, and especially in our program area. As far as our current students sitting in our CTE classes now, to give us an idea of how this relates to our industry-based certifications and that GPA GPM 5.3, 82% of our current high school students are sitting in a CTE class. So I know sometimes people might have a vision of what career in tech was years ago, maybe even calling it vocational education. That's not what it is today. So when you think about 82% of our students, that's over 12,000 of our high school students are currently enrolled in a CTE class. So it's not some other kid, those kids, it's your neighborhood kids, it's all of our students. An even more exciting number is that 92% of our current high school students have taken at least one CTE class. So again, we really are capturing the vast majority of our high school students. And we're excited about that. We know that we have opportunities for our students that are good for them to take advantage of. When we look at demographics within CTE, these are our CTE student groups. So this is what our specific population looks like. It almost exactly mirrors our district demographics if you look across all of these different groups. I do have to have one little caveat. A report that I was pulling gave me some additional numbers in the language English proficient category, so that's an update I need to make on that 9.9%. That actually is dropped to 5.5. It was an error that I made in calculation, so I'll get that adjusted and resubmit it. But you'll notice that that also mirrors our secondary percentages for our general student group. So as we talk about getting directly into the GPM 5.3, I want to remind everyone that there are local certifications that we deem as a community as important for our students. All of our different programs of study actually have advisory boards, and those are comprised of post-secondary education, our business and industry professionals, our teachers, our students, and other community members that want to have some feedback offered towards our programs of study. And so some of those certifications we've begun because community members and business leaders have told us they're important for our students. So that's where we have our local, and we'll continue to support the local certifications. IBCs is something new over the last few years as they've become a key component of college and career military readiness. And one thing to notice or to note, if you didn't already know this, is that our CTE funding actually covers all of the expenses for our certifications. So when we talked about those 7,800 certifications, those were the ones earned. There are many more that are taken by students, and CTE and Round Rock ISD covers the expense of all of those. So for none of these certifications do our students have to pay. So we're really proud of that opportunity for our students. So you'll notice the proposed goal is that the percentage of comprehensive high school students, grade 9 to 12, who successfully earn an industry-based certification, or IBC, will increase from 10% to 12.5% by 2024. That's if everything stays status quo, right? We know that our courses may change, our enrollments may adjust, but when we look at what a fair percentage for our students to be able to attain and for our teachers to really work toward as a goal, increasing that 0.5 per year, we feel is a very fair estimate for our teachers and for our students. When we look at actual courses that are associated with IBCs, we offer about 100 different classes here in Round Rock ISD in the CTE program area. 25 of them right now relate to IBC exams. We're always working to identify new connections and places where that makes sense for our curriculum, but that's the important thing to know is we have a curriculum that we have to teach our students and get them prepared for, and we want to make sure that those IBCs make sense for our students so they're not trying to attain a credential that doesn't lead them anywhere or that we're not already preparing them for in class. So you can see a wide variety of courses that lead to these exams. So as we said, last year there were over 3,000 students that completed a course related to an IBC. So we're already shrinking down from about 12,000 students sitting in a CTE class in high school to just over 3,300 that are actually connected with our industry-based certifications. Of that last school year, we had 1,585 IBC certifications earned by 1,388 individual students. That means we had almost 200 students potentially that earned multiple, or we could have even had fewer than that and students earning 2, 3, 4 credentials. It just depends on the programs of study they're enrolled in. Some students are involved in multiple programs of study, and so they have the opportunity for more certifications. But that number represents 10% of our comprehensive high school students earning an industry-based certification. So when we just look at our enrollment and where enrollment is going over the next few years, we have marked, as I said, that 0.5% growth year over year. So this year our goal is to reach 10.5% of our current high school population. And of course, as our population grows, that percentage means a larger number for our teachers to attain. But I have no doubt that we have the best CTE teachers in the state of Texas, and they'll get our students prepared. They're always looking for ways to improve what they're doing. In fact, I was at Stony Point today, and an engineering teacher, I was watching him 3D print some items that his students were creating, and without even prompting or having a conversation about it, he said, I'm changing some things in my curriculum. We're going from paper-based more to computer-based, and my kids are going to be more successful on the Inventor certification, which is an Autodesk product. And I said, it's funny that you should say that. I'm presenting this evening at our school board meeting just about this, and he was so excited to have that validated in the work that he does, because he knows that it's important. And of course, President Chadwell, with work in engineering, you're aware of Inventor. Inventor is not an easy software package for students, and it's actually connected with our freshman level engineering class. So we're already talking about this industry professional certification and bringing it down into a much lower level, because that's where it makes sense for our kiddos. But again, this teacher, without even prompting, he said, I'm going to get a higher rate, and I'm going to go back and test my older students. I'm going to go back and give them more prep. And it was a great day to hear everything align in that. But in hearing that and seeing where the direction that we're going, and of course giving some accolades for the year, I've got to brag on our teachers and all that they're doing. But if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Ms. Bessa.
So I'm super excited about all the offerings that we have for different industry-based certifications. My son's now a freshman, and he's in some CTE courses as well, so that's terrific. One thing that a question that I sent, and there was an answer on it, but I really, really want our kids to have these certifications, because I really, really want them to be able to graduate and get a good job, which either can, help finance their college or whatever other life endeavor they have. And so I kind of pushed back on the 0.5% a year and said, can we do better? Can we do more? And I want to know, can we do better? Can we do more?
No, I appreciate that question. As I said with the Inventor, these certifications are not high school level certifications. They're truly industry level certifications, and many actually have qualifiers that students have to reach. In order to test for an EKG certification, students have to do 10 live EKGs. In order to test for veterinary assistant, they actually have to have 5 hours shadowing with a veterinarian. So some of that time they get to do within our class, which is called the practicum course. They actually go out and they shadow and work with a vet, but students who are truly dedicated to that have to do that on evenings, weekends, and holidays in order to reach that 500. So there are some places where just good old instruction is going to make it happen, and we're going to increase our numbers, but there truly are some areas where it's not always possible for every single student, depending on the circumstances, to be able to reach it. If we can blow this out of the water and the next year we just have a huge bump, I would love to adjust it, but just right now, knowing where our capacity is and these high-level exams that we're bringing into our high schools, I just feel like that's a very good number for us to shoot for right now. Not sure if that totally answers your question.
Well, I think if we can come back to it and say, okay, we're, because I always want to push harder, more opportunities, because I don't want our kids to have a lot of debt. And this is a great way that we can prepare them for making a good living when they graduate, so that they can finance their other endeavors. And I just want as many kids to take advantage of that opportunity as possible. And so whatever we can do to promote these certifications, these opportunities, I want us doing.
But I think just what you're doing right now, just having the conversation about it, I think that makes a big impact on it.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions for you, Ms. Weir, and then Mrs. Gonzalez, and then Mr. Moses.
I just had a quick question, because you provided us with this, and I hadn't seen it before. So I was just kind of curious. Our goal is earned, but I noticed on your spreadsheet you had passing equals passed/attempted, but earned is passed and enrolled.
Yes, ma'am.
And I was just wondering if you could explain sort of what that meant.
Yes, absolutely. So on the handout that you have, the two columns on the right showing by campus and the percentages that are in bold, as I said, some of our exams, students actually have to reach a certain criteria in order to test for that, and those aren't our standards. Those are standards set by the testing entity. In the case of certified nurse aide, that's actually a state-mandated requirement that students have to meet. So that shows at one point in time during the school year when we took an enrollment number, kind of a snapshot of our students, it shows us how many actually of that attempted the exam. So whether that's because they didn't meet the hours in order to do that, or they were absent on the day and didn't come in to make it up. So it's showing how many kids were actually sitting in seats, but what number of those actually took. So that's the difference between passing is of the kids who attempted and passed versus earned is how many how many total students there were in the class, and of those, how many actually earned the certification. I struggled with how to make that as clear as possible. Sorry. I wanted to show that picture because there are little nuances like that in our coursework.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
no,
welcome.
that makes sense.
Okay,
that makes sense.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Gonzalez and then Mr. Moses.
Thank you for your presentation and
Yes,
your
ma'am.
passion. And as you know, technical education and CTE is very important to me as well. I just want to emphasize what a gift we are giving to our students to be able to leave high school with an industry certification, but also maybe you don't get that certification, but you get a taste of certain jobs you might want or you might not want. And I think it's really important that what we're doing here is we're getting rid of a stigma of, like you said, it's not vocational education. You know, no one has a new baby and looks at it and goes, I want you to be a plumber. But what we're doing by what we're doing here is filling a skills gap in the state of Texas. And as we go forward, you know, is it our goal to add more certifications? Kind of what is the goal to get more industry partners and things of that such?
Yes, ma'am. So we're always looking for different opportunities for alignment between the current list of IBCs and our coursework. And then we're also looking at adding new courses. One of the areas that we've proposed to the state as a regional program of study is drone aviation or unmanned aerial vehicles. So we know how important those are. Yes, we see lots of hobbies, but there's almost every sector of business that you can look at is utilizing drones now. And one of the licenses that's on the IBC list is the FAA 107, and so that's the pilot license for the UAV vehicles. And so we're hoping to bring in that drone aviation. Keep our fingers crossed that they approve it and we start that next school year. But that's an exciting one for us. So there are cases where we may see an increase in certifications, but without knowing that those things are going to happen, I wanted to give a really good baseline data for us to compare apples to apples.
Right. And as we look at those certifications, I hope we're looking at the ones that earn good wages. I know cybersecurity is one that is busting at the seams. So if we could look at that, I don't know how you can implement it. That's out of my wheelhouse, but I'm very aware that there's a high demand for that.
That we're also looking at that for next school year too. So yay!
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you,
Mr. Moses.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you very much for the presentation. And now, kind of go back to something that Representative Terlico said, how businesses really benefit from a strong school system. And I look at the list that we're going on of our students and adding things in the future like cybersecurity. Those are jobs that can directly benefit our local business owners and our local community. And I've always felt like our public schools are incubators of entrepreneurship. So it's going to really encourage students to, hey, I have this passion in introduction to engineering design. And also they want to go to college and pursue their own engineering firm as they grow older. So I think that's just a great gift to be given our students. So in that token, or in that tone really, in these, is there anything that really helps kids who might think one day they want to go start their own business? Is that anything that ingrained in this curriculum?
So the state right now is redoing all of our programs of study, and in several of the programs of study, they're actually creating a practicum course or a capstone that would be entrepreneurship that goes all the way across the different program areas. Here in Round Rock, at each of our high schools, we have a strand for entrepreneurship where our students in their senior year get to start a small business and get that going. The same engineering teacher I referenced today said, my kids one day, if they become engineers, they need to figure out how to run a business. this, so I want to work with the marketing teacher. So those things are happening, and it is something that we hope to have across the board for our students to be able to get out and do that experience in a safe place where if they fail, we can help pick them up and show them what the next step is. It's still somebody's money that they're playing with, but yes, that's what we're definitely trying to do.
Okay, yeah, we absolutely want them to be workforce ready, but there's somebody who can go out and create not just their own company, but jobs for others. That just is a benefit to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Vessa.
So, in our review of this and goal progress measures, are we when Amy pointed out on this chart, we have a lot of kids that are enrolled, but that don't earn the certificate. Or do we have goals in terms of like increasing those numbers? Is that something that we could look at in terms of tracking this as we go? Because I think if we have a lot of kids enrolled, and the more that enrolled that actually earn the certificate, then the better we're going to do on this measure. So is that something we can look at is making some goals in terms of earning the certificate in terms of a percentage enrolled?
Is that a question? Yes, please.
Thank you for mentioning that. When we go in an item or two here, we'll be looking at the goal progress measures overall and all the goals and constraints and so forth. And just a few days ago, Sherry and I were talking and realized that we had a lot more room to move certification earning than we did the enrollment piece. Classes are full where, students only have so much room in their schedule and so forth. So I know very back on a few slides ago when she showed you that the GPM is now modified to be about certification earning. So those students who are in seats and didn't test, or perhaps tested and weren't successful, that is the focus of the goal now. It'll be to increase certifications earned. And there was a question earlier about, the number not seeming that aggressive. I just want to remind everybody, the denominator is 9 through 12 graders, because certifications can be earned at a lot of different points in high school. So there's a big 13,000 plus denominator there. So it's still a lot of kids increasing over the 5 years.
So I've got a couple quick comments. So thank you for the presentation. It's always good to see this. And I'd like the fact that all of these are certifications that come out, and they are hopefully very marketable. I do know that there are some that change. The demand for them changes. But I would like to encourage you to the idea of the entrepreneur program, especially that you have an incubator here. Incubator in I think what you were saying was that the teacher was talking about, well, I'm going to get the students involved with the marketing. There are a lot of incubators around Austin and, of course, the Silicon Valley. They really emphasize incubators where you go and you sit in these co-working spaces where people kind of share ideas. Somebody's an expert in marketing, somebody's an expert in coding, somebody's an expert in whatever, sales or something, and they kind of all tap into that. So if you can emphasize that. And then the articulation, I'm glad to see that there's so much, because we are inside the ACC boundaries and all of our students, and I don't remember what the college, the rate is, the hour per curriculum, $300 an hour, but it's great that you can now roll that into. And ACC's billboards are start here, get there, which is always, it's free. There's no admission to get into ACC. You can just sign up and go. You don't have to have a GPA or whatever. So it is a great starting point. So I'm glad to see that within our school district we have campuses that are just a few minutes away, and then of course all over. So again, I appreciate all the work that's on that. I think there is a growing demand for that, and of course Ms. Gonzalez, then her TSTC focus is that's a huge advantage, and I'd love to see more of that emphasized and not just the 4-year default. Dr. Flores.
No, I just wanted to say I want to thank Sherry Bonds for a great presentation. I also want to commend Sherry, because Sherry is, again, like many of the Round Rock ISD staff, one of the best in the state with regards to CTE. Mr. Talarico, as well as both the Austin and Round Rock chambers utilized Sherry's extensive work on that. But I also want to commend this district for several years prior to its House Bill 5, used to be House Bill 3, then House Bill 5 was the predeterminant of what and how we can get more students ready for the world of work as well as college. And what this district did even before House Bill 5, they came back with each high school has academies, and we could spend a whole hour talking about that. But what Ms. Bonds, I think, when questions are asked, how do we increase this? We continue to do this hard work, but we also need to look at things differently from the standpoint. I know we've got property for High School 6 and High School 7, but we also have the opportunity to be thinking about a CTE high school. A CTE high school that can allow for a progression of what exactly the skills that are needed in today's workforce, and students to be really saying, I may not need to be in the band, I may not be on the football team, I don't need a comprehensive high school, I need to be able to work and get ready for that, or engineering school, whatever it needs to be. But Sherry always asked about that. She said, can I ask? I said, no, I'll ask it for you. You just stay. But great job, Sherry Bonds.
Thank you very much. Everyone have a great evening.
Okay,
Where's
thank
Ms.
you.
Mitchell?
Yeah.
Where's Miss Mitchell?
Rock star.
She's getting ready to go to Scotland, sir.
Okay,
She
okay.
gets to go and have a good, required vacation, her needed.
So, ready to break? We'll take a quick break. We'll do that. Dr. Oddix, how long will your financial go? A few minutes?
I can do it quick.
Okay, that all right?
Is it 2 slides?
No
fine.
slides.
All right.
Hold.
Pull them up.
All right. So, good evening, President Chadwell, members of the board, and Dr. Flores. I'm going to go over the July financials. This is the first month of our fiscal year, so the current columns that you see you'll see the exact same numbers in the shown in the year-to-date columns. Before I go into the actual financials, just to give you an update that Maxwell Ritter, our audit firm, is currently on site working with Rosanna and her team on the audit for the 18-19 fiscal year. Plan to bring the CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, to the board for approval at the November meeting. So talk a little bit about the numbers, starting with the general fund for the month of July. We had revenue of $2.6 million, had total expenditures of $29.6, which is roughly $3.3 million better than budget. Had a loss for the month right at $27 million. Normally, if you lost $27 million in a month, you'd be very concerned. But with how our income, how our revenue stream works, it's very heavy at the start of the year. We're mainly get property taxes, our main source of revenue, so that comes in heavy in the December through February, March time frame. So we're at a very low point in the year in terms of our revenue stream, running ahead of budget in terms of our expenses. So no real concerns. It's just a normal timing of the cash flow. We had a fund balance at the end of a general fund balance at the end of July of $190 million. Flipping the page to food service, very little happened in July, given that it was summer school. Had revenue of $39,000, expense of $18,000, so we made $21,000 for the month. That fund balance is right at $10.5 million. Next, in terms of debt service for the month, had revenue of $1.6 million. On the expense side, we made one of our semi-annual debt payments, which is due on August 1st. We made that at the end of July, so we made our principal payment of $69 million, had interest expense of $14.7, so total expense for the month was $83.7. That was better than budget by roughly $2.7 million. Our interest expense was better than budget due to the fact that we did a refunding last year, and we basically lowered our interest rate, and so our interest expense came in less than budget on that payment. So for the month, had a loss of $83 million, given that semi-annual debt payment. So our current fund balance at the end of July is $22.8 million. Our next debt payment will be on February the 1st of $19 million. Have total debt outstanding of $1,058 million. So that's the numbers piece. As the board is aware, staff is currently actively working on preparing to sell the remaining 2018 bond authorization this year, as well as refund, which is in essence just refinancing two of our outstanding 2010 Build America bonds, also referred to as BAB bonds. We're planning to bring next month to the board for approval a plan to bring a parameter order as well as ask you at the October meeting to vote on whether to do this next sale as a competitive or a negotiated sale. As you've seen on the consent agenda, we're recommending that Estrada Hinosa be approved as the district's financial advisor. Members of that team are here tonight in the audience with us. I plan, if the board approves them tonight, plan to start working with them tomorrow, as there's a lot of work to get done, given that our intent is to sell those bonds this fiscal year so that we have money available to continue the work on our 2018 projects. And then finally, on the bond fund report for the month of July, had total revenue right at $400,000, expenses at a little over $400,000, so had basically pretty much a break-even month there, had $30,000 of net loss. Have a current fund balance, which is a compilation of the 2008, 2014, and 2018 bond funds that are still in fund balance of $218 million. So are there any questions?
Ms. Vessa.
So I just had one question on the investment income for July.
Right.
I mean, we only actually took in 10% of basically what we estimated we would.
Right. So the piece there, and I put it in the financial write-up, and I'm going to try to give you a real kind of a non-financial answer to a very financial question. But what the driver of that is, like Wayne Curry tracks our investments every month, and so some of the investments that we have are bonds, and so here's what goes on. At 11 months out of the year, we simply value those bonds at what's called the face value. So if you had a bond, it would say this bond is worth $1,000. So on our books, we're carrying that and saying that's worth $1,000 to us. When we close our books at the end of the fiscal year on June 30, which was the prior month, we do a thing called mark to market, which is saying, basically, given the interest rate on this bond, what is the market saying that bond is worth given its interest rate? So if the interest rate is higher, like out in the market, is higher than this bond, when you marked it to market, you would say, well, the market's not going to pay me the face value of this bond, it's going to pay me a lower rate. Okay? And so if it was that way, you've got a movement in the value, and so you're pushing on that month the value of your earnings in a certain direction, depending on that relationship. Okay? Once you hit July, it's called a reversing order, where you simply say, okay, we did that to simply so that when we close the books at the end of the year, we mark those investments to market. All the remaining months of the year, we're simply saying we're recording that as the face value of the bond. And from a practical standpoint, we hold all of the bonds that we have as investments until they actually mature. So we're always guaranteed we're going to get the face value of that bond because we hold it to maturity. And at maturity, regardless of the market, you're going to get the value of those bonds when they mature. And so all that happened here is that given when we closed the books in June, and now we're back to the normal thing we're going to do the rest of the month, starting in the month of July, it's a reversing order or a reversing entry that is the net result of that accounting transaction. Every expectation is that's not going to be something that is actually, we're way behind the curve when it comes to investments. We're still trending. The Fed lowered the interest rate 25 basis points a couple of weeks ago, but we embedded, when we built our budget, the assumption that the Fed would do that twice, that they would reduce it 2 times over the course of the year. So everything is still on track in terms of what I expect our ultimate investment income to be.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? If not, I guess yours is available as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. It's 8:42. Let's take a quick break and try to be back, 10 till or so. Well, get restarted here. It's 8:55, and we will go to agenda item. Our next one is I1, first reading policy AE local. Flores?
Yes. The first reading of policy AE local will be delivered by Mandy Estes, our Chief Teaching and Learning. So, Mandy?
Yes, well, good evening again, trustees. We've made a lot of positive momentum towards this item in the PIB committee. There's been good dialogue around this document. We do still continue to collect some feedback from within the district, and in fact, we will be collecting feedback from our DAC committee on Tuesday the 1st. I think that's when the 1st is. And also from our Equity Task Force on the 16th of October. So this, again, is a very preliminary document. We wanted to get the language in front of the full board tonight so that other trustees who are not on the PIB could share any thoughts that they had or concerns that they had, so we could start to capture that from the full board. And I do know that Trustee Weir had sent in a few items that may be a piece to start the conversation. But essentially, this is a educational philosophy policy previous to this. I believe we had maybe the first 2 paragraphs in our original policy. So this was a policy that has not been fleshed out for, I don't know if it ever has. As part of Lone Star governance, this would be the section of policy where the board's goals and constraints would eventually land as well. Since those have not been approved yet, you don't see those in the document tonight. As we scroll through, I'll just pull through real quickly. I know you have a copy of the red line version in your packet. We are choosing to display the black line version just because there's been so many changes and it's so new that it's pretty messy to display the red line version. But I did want to note that you have that in your packet for reference as well. It does contain our vision and mission statement. There's a statement about the board's role, statement about the superintendent's role, and also contained in that is the idea that the language around this policy shall be publicized and included in district decisions and so forth. There are 4 core beliefs. Now, our prior policy here had a number of core beliefs, and so a team at the district worked to condense these down to 4, thinking that whenever you have a large number of beliefs, then no one probably remembers any of them. And so the attempt was made to make these very memorable, concise, and really capture the essence of what we believe in here in the district. And then I'll just scroll through it real quick to review it with all the trustees, and then we'll take questions and comments so that we can go back and continue our work. The philosophy of education states that the board believes each student should be provided with a stimulating environment and opportunities for experiences designed to promote skills and behaviors that are articulated in the learner profile, which is at the end of this policy. There's a theory of action for teaching and learning, and this is a section that we have gotten some recent feedback from that I believe will probably iterate a little bit more. There's some clarity that I think would be helpful to add here, but essentially the idea is that schools would have varying degrees of autonomy and be provided additional support for schools that are struggling or lower performing, I should say. Now, we would still have to determine based upon what. Right now it reads based upon board goals. There's been some discussions that are around in the district of, is that what we want to rank schools on, or do we want to use some kind of comparison group look to determine where we deploy more of our resources? But the idea is that the trustees and the board and within the district, we would work in a flexible manner to deploy resources and support to the schools who most needed them. When you go on down, here's our profile of a learner. Previously, we had a graduate profile that was written back many years ago, probably at least 12 years ago, and it really has stood the test of time. But our team took that graduate profile, made some revisions, again, made it a little more concise. We inserted some language that Trustee Vessa and Trustee Gonzalez liked on this one, a little bit of tweaking here. But the idea would be that this is the learner that we are striving to create here in Round Rock ISD. And then again, as I said earlier, the ARC guides our work, but we would also add in this policy the board goals and constraints once those are adopted. And so with that, I would invite discussion around this, and I'll be taking notes and asking any clarifying questions so that we can try to get input again from the full board around this policy.
Ms. Weir.
Well, I did see you had kind of you got the typo. And
I
then,
did, thank you.
so I don't know if y'all had read, if the other trustees had read sort of my concern on the core beliefs. And I noticed that you did change it to their community instead of just the community. Because I did want to make sure that we were making it a smaller subsection, because it is our neighborhood schools that everybody loves. I personally still like the neighborhood language, but I don't know how the other trustees feel about that. And then I guess I was just sort of, I don't know where the free from fear, intimidation, violence, and drugs had initially come from.
Yeah, and when I saw your question, I honestly don't recall exactly what caused that to drop. It may have been, there was some discussion about positivity behind these core beliefs, and so that may be the point at which it dropped off. We worked on it within the district. The PIB committee worked on it some. It's been worked on quite a bit, so I don't recall. And that's certainly language that we could easily insert back in, and I think we would all agree that that's very important. So if stating it here is something that the trustees feel strongly about, we're certainly happy to do that.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, do any of...
So what was your, about the
Well,
neighborhood versus neighbor
okay,
community?
So I printed out the red line.
I have the red line in front of me.
If you look on page 2, that sort of the last number 1, the new number 1, it initially, initially it was just the community, and then I had just kind of, the community is so broad, and we do have high-performing schools in our community, but not necessarily in every neighborhood. So I kind of liked the neighborhood language better, and then we had struck out neighborhood schools probably that is free of fear, intimidation, violence, and drugs.
So I actually made that change because I don't really deem all of our schools as neighborhood schools. When I look at where I live and where McNeil is, I'm actually closer to Round Rock. So that's my community, but that's not where my child goes to school. So that's why I changed it.
So, I guess since we use sort of the learning communities language, do we want to make it learning community? If we're not going to use neighborhood, maybe in your learning community? I don't know.
I hear you. I don't want to. I feel like I don't want to go down the rabbit hole like wordsmithing it so much at that level. I mean, if it's learning community, that's fine. But I think neighborhood. I almost see neighborhood and community as. I know they're not exactly synonymous.
Why don't you put them both in there? Neighborhood or communities and or slash. It's pretty cheap to type.
We're wordsmithing at this point. So.
Yeah, we are. I mean, that was just my initial thought when I just saw the community, because I guess I was thinking of all of us as a community, as the Round Rock ISD, one family, one community, and if you have pockets that don't have high-performing schools, we didn't want to. I didn't think we wanted to take that out of our core beliefs, because equity is something that we're looking at and in our goals and everything. So to ensure that those pockets of our district that maybe are needing high-performing schools, I didn't want to leave them out.
What if we just strike in their community, and so it's just all families deserve access to a high-performing school?
No.
I don't think that's what you're getting at, though. What you're getting at is in your community, close to you, not necessarily, across town, but near you. And so I think that all that you've stated right before this, if we cross that out, it doesn't address that.
I was going to say, we have a certain percentage of students who are, they transfer, they go to other campuses. So is it considered they live in one neighborhood, but because their parents work for the district or whatever, it's an open enrollment. I saw that. I'm either fine either way with it, community or neighborhood. While you're thinking about that, and while you're thinking, my first question was when I saw the ARC, you had that scratched out on the red line at the very top, but you moved it down. So
I think we just moved it down.
You just moved it down. And the other thing I liked was the earned autonomy, that you're not prescribing exactly, here's this transcript, every campus is going to follow this transcript this week. You give them flexibility. So, but you give them a baseline, is that right? the ARC and the TEAT.
Right. We provide the scope and sequence. We provide multiple resources. We allow some flexibility for all campuses within that. But I think the important thing about earned autonomy is we staff and board would need to determine what that really means. Does that mean that on some campuses they are the ones that we tap first to pilot certain programs or resources? What exactly does that mean? Because we certainly don't want to send a message that certain campuses that are working really, really hard with probably a large number of students in poverty don't have access to some innovative programs too. So there has been some discussion about that language and what does that mean, and is there perhaps a different way to word that? And that's something that I think we'll get good feedback probably from the DAC committee on.
Right, because I think on that one in particular, it's really more about support. I mean, yeah, there might be some more things we need to go in there in certain classrooms or certain subgroups that need some specific help, but it really is about just supporting that school so that they can grow and achieve.
That's right, and a great example would be currently now we don't have enough instructional coaches to go around the district. So what we do is we deploy that support more strategically to campuses that may need that support of the instructional coaches. Now, some of our higher performing campuses lament that fact, and it's just one of Kenneth's A times B. We don't want to have more staff than what is fiscally responsible, but we try to deploy that staff in a responsible way.
So this is the first reading, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're not adopting this tonight?
No, sir. And
right.
and I anticipate whatever feedback we have, if we have quite a bit of feedback from the staff and DAC and the Equity Task Force, then we may want to go back to the PIB committee and massage again before we bring it back. So we did want to bring it tonight for the full board, though, so you can see the progress that we've made, have it as a first reading. There may be very little change that needs to happen after tonight, and then we'd be ready to bring it back to you at a later date.
I think this is the very first policy the PIB committee really had on the agenda and tackled. And so I think I want to just commend trustees Vessa and Gonzalez, the work they've done at the PIB committee and helping us get this point, and you too, Mandy, and your team, because this has been, I think we've all have put a lot into this to try and get this to a spot where we feel comfortable with, where it really does reflect what our district values as far as providing the education to our students and addressing some of the equity issues that we see. Because we can't, I'm going to probably paraphrase what Belafio said, is you can't keep doing the same thing and be expecting different results. And so if we're looking at this and doing some things a little bit differently, hopefully that then drives the achievement that we're hoping to see.
You did say you're going to, the equity.
Yes, on the 16th. That's their next
hasn't looked
meeting.
At this yet. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I will just wait and see, because I will bet they have quite a bit.
I bet they do too.
To say.
Any other comments on this that we can take? Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Estes. Board members, we'll go to agenda item J, action items for consideration by consent. There's quite a few on here. We had some comments on that. The reason we put so much on consent is we're trying to expedite our meetings, make them go a little quicker. But I understand there's one or two that need to be pulled. Number 2 needs to be pulled completely. And then you have one you want to...
Right. Yeah, just item 21. We'll just move it down to the next discussion or action items. We can address that one there.
So just pull it out now. You want to discuss it in detail? You can discuss any of these you want.
Right. Well, that one, we're going to treat it, instead of waiving first reading, we're going to treat it as a first reading. I know Trustee Weir had a little bit of cleanup language that she was hoping to get in there. I think it's fair, and it is. I think it's in line with the spirit of what we were trying to do with the policy. And so just go ahead. We can add that and either talk about it separately, or we can just bring it back next meeting after we've made that tweak for second reading.
Yeah, it almost belongs right now in I as a discussion item.
That's kind of weird. I don't want to move it up for whatever we want to do.
And I don't know, because everybody saw my question and your answer, I think. So,
this is about the questions and the amount of
this
time
about the
and all that.
timing
Just clarifying that if
and
there's new information that comes out, that it's all fair game.
Right, because my concern had been that if we couldn't pull something from the consent agenda without asking a question 7 days ahead of time, but we didn't get the information.
Right, and I
Less
think,
than that.
And I think whenever we were in there working it all made sense to us, but I think getting some fresh eyes on it helps. Like, okay, maybe we can tighten it up a little bit, even though it made sense to us.
Yeah. So yes, I appreciate that if y'all, of course, take that back and.
So, and I'll make a comment on this too. These are policies. These are all local policies. These are ours. So we can, if necessary, we can always waive them on a, if there's an extenuating circumstance. And I think that one of the things that we want to do is get as much information out for this particular one to the public and to the board, so we have it as much time as possible to look at it. But just like you said, sometimes there might be new information that comes up. So.
Well, so if there's no other discussion on that, do we just want to take 21 off?
Yeah, and just,
for right now.
But just real quick, Doug, then does that count as first reading if we just kind of just discussed it?
Well, it's on the agenda for action, so I would just say pull it from the action that you're about to take on. Oh,
I guess it doesn't.
Sorry.
I think I know where you're going to get. So I think.
Yeah, I would just pull it so that because you've listed it as approving it subject to the waiver, and I would just say let's just pull it so you don't do that.
So then we're pulling 2 and 21? Okay. Can I just take 1 second to a couple questions that I've had before we vote on all these consent agenda items real quick? Is that okay, Mr. President?
Sure.
So on just on number 10, because I know we still have some of the speakers that spoke on dyslexia, and I did confirm with Dr. Flores and his team that we will have that presentation in October. So I'm looking forward to that. And on number 15, I personally had some questions about this, and Mr. Worcester and I had talked about it on Monday. And just for anybody watching or that was curious about that one, there's no money involved. There's no. It's not the building of a high school. It is literally telling the city of Austin, per their request, they wanted to know when and if we build, where are we going to put the easements so that they are able to plan. That is nothing more than that.
Good point. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, that did say future Pearson Ranch High School, so there was something about, has that been voted
so
on?
it is absolutely not. It's just the city of Austin. They have some planning requirements, and they were just going to say eventually, someday in the future, this is where we want to put our easement, and that's all that it is.
Okay, then can I get a motion on this, and then we can discuss it one more time? Sure. Technically.
Okay, then I'll make it. Mr. President, I move that the board adopt action items J1, J3 through J20, and J22 through J24 by consent.
Second. Okay, got a motion for J1 through 24, except 2 and 21 for consideration by consent. Any further discussion? I have a couple of comments here. So number 7 is the resolution for and number 6 and 7 for the appraisal districts. I'm on the appraisal board for Williamson Central Appraisal District. I encourage any of you all to come to the meeting there. I was appointed when the previous Brig Morales was on the board, when Round Rock ISD annexed or became part of ACC. He had to step off because he was an instructor there. So I just filled in for him, but I've been participating ever since. As I mentioned before, it's a critical job. It's one of the 3 legs of the whole. Where does our tax come to pay for the district? It comes from the appraisal, it comes from the tax collector, and it comes from the taxing entities, the city, the county, the MUDs, whatever you are. So it is an important role, and they do a great job, both Travis and Williamson County. And then the other one was number 14, Dr. Flores is listed as a representative for the chamber board. I know there was a couple of questions about that. We've always had the superintendent. I don't think it's a requirement. I think the chamber's bylaws say that any representative from the board or the district can be it. So I did not hear anybody volunteering, stepping forward to be it. But if it's fine with you all, we'll go forward with it. But in the future, I guess we can always change it. So keep that in mind. Any comments on that? Any comments on any of them?
I'm actually going to go to just the item J, 4. Dr. Audix, will you just real quickly talk on what, part of this goes back to what Representative Terlico was talking about House Bill 3, but what we're doing there as far as the tax rate?
As part of House Bill 3, they compressed the tax rate, where before it had been at $1 was sort of the starting point, and they lowered that from $1 to 93 cents, and so then we have 4 golden pennies on top of that. So for our taxpayers, where our rate has on the M&O that pays salaries and light bill, pays the operating costs for the district, for many years our rate was always $1.04. And so with House Bill 3 compressing that down, that took the taxpayers' rate down from $1.04 to 97 cents on the M&O side. The INS tax rate, the interest and sinking fund, which repays our bonds, that rate hasn't changed. It's still at 0.2648. And so even for, if I'm the regular taxpayer, the normal thing is, well, hey, even if you don't change the tax rate normally, my values are going up, so I'm always paying more in property tax. Well, by lowering that tax rate by 7 cents, even with the property value growth, the average taxpayer's bill should actually decrease slightly, a little over 3% decrease in their tax bill this year, thanks to House Bill 3.
And then real quick, Mr. Worcester, on number 18, the Cedar Valley chiller, can you give us a quick review? I know the Facilities Committee had a review of that, and there was something about a boiler and a chiller. So just
yes, sir. President Chadwell, Dr. Flores, and trustee members, what you are reading in the item number 18 is that the request at this point in time is to be able to pass this request for hardware, mechanical hardware, only necessary hardware. It takes approximately 12 weeks to actually fabricate a chiller and deliver it. And so knowing that there are parts that will follow along in this project, but we need to be able to order a new chiller and necessary mechanical equipment. So that is what you're approving tonight. The other notion that you mentioned, Mr. Chadwell, is that it's item number 17. That is a bond project, and that is a boiler that is not related to cooling and or heating of the building. It is a boiler that is related only to domestic water heat, and so it is a separate project that has been in the bond.
So this is related to, but not the $8 million that was mentioned in the facilities. That's going to come later.
That's correct. The request has been to be able to define the scope of that project, and so we are in the process of doing that, and we'll be bringing that to the facility committee in a future agenda item.
Very good. Do you have a light on, Ms. Moses? Maybe it's from 4. All right, we have a motion and a second on all of the items 1 through 24, except 2 and 21. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. Did you raise your hand? Okay, it's real quick. 6-0, thank you. All right, we'll go to agenda item K, action items, discussion, possible action on the 1920 through 1923-24 school year board student outcome goals and constraints. Mandy Estes and Kathy Malerba.
All right, while Kathy's pulling this up, we have just a few slides because I believe the draft of the goals have been sent out to the trustees. So I just want to start with walking us through a little bit of the journey to get to this point. Again, this started back in March when the application was submitted to participate in the Lone Star Governance and Exemplar cohort. So that should make us very proud that we're in the Exemplar cohort, I believe. And then in July through August, there were trainings that the trustees participated in, as well as members of the leadership team. Dr. Drew Howard actually led a board workshop on August the 8th, and that's when we started as a group in this discussion. And then you'll see several meetings after that, which brings us to today and future when the district and campus improvement plans will be presented to the board, which is next month. So that's how we have arrived at today. Trustee Vessa had sent in consideration for could we more directly address the growth issue of our students. And so we've worked some new proposed additions under these two goals to try to capture her concerns or her wishes. And you'll see that we've added goal progress measure 3.4 and 4.4. And the language there is did not meet grade level in the prior year who exceed expected progress, and the percentage of those students rising. So in other words, that means that within both the math and the ELA goals that we have in place, that we would expect more students to exceed expected progress than what are currently doing so by 2024.
Good. Yep. Ready for a question? Okay.
Absolutely.
So the 25 and 35% represents our current baseline. That's what we determine right now are the number of, or the percentage of students who
exceed.
So, and I mean, I'm always aggressive. Can we do more? Can we do higher?
Well,
why or why not?
Keep in mind, this is of the students who did not meet, and so these are the students who it's not on the entirety. And Kathy, I think, has some information that would help with the numbers of students that this would involve. We feel like, and I'll put it to you similar to Sherry Bonds, we feel like this is a realistic and attainable goal, but one that will require some work. And certainly, if we find that we're exceeding that in a year or two, we challenge ourselves around here, and so we would certainly want to raise that bar.
I'll add to that the does not meet grade level group is the smallest group because, of course, most students pass the test, so that means there are fewer kids comprising the percentage, and so that's actually fairly aggressive. We do have another worksheet. It's on my computer, where we sort of check the number of students that comprise each of these percentages and divided that by the number of campuses that would be contributing to the goal. And that number of students feels realistic and achievable to us. So, and then, I'll also add that the other growth goal is focused on meeting or exceeding progress for all students at all levels of attainment. So we're really aggressively working growth even without this goal, but the additional push to get more students to exceed, we feel like we're comfortable with the number of students per year that would require.
I do think that's a great point for everyone to remember is our teachers are working really hard in the classrooms, and when we have kids who come in several years below, sometimes it takes multiple years for things to tick so that they are back up to where we want them to be to grade level. So I think when Dr. Malabra said that this is an additional push, do keep in mind as trustees that our teachers are working really hard already to move kids along and to get them up where they need to be.
Okay.
Can I just ask one thing? I printed this out maybe too soon. Is there a 3.3? Because you have 3.4 up there.
I was looking at that too.
Okay, good. So it's not. Sometimes when I print them and things change, I don't know if it's just me because I printed.
It's been me going back and forth between too many documents. I'll just confirm that for you.
Okay.
No, Amy,
That's correct.
My
It
mind
would be
was
a
like, am I missing something?
3.3,
Where is 3.3?
but it also would be a 4.4. So
Okay, yeah,
there because
4.4.
there's an extra one under algebra.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's 3.3 and then 4.4.
Yes.
Okay.
It was a test.
I also wanted to say thank you for putting it in there. I mean, you listened and humored me in this one, and I appreciate it.
Okay. And the other document is just the backup to all
Like
that.
me to pull up the full document for review, or
I was going to say, if you you're talking about the one that's 7-page,
Yes, sir.
all the things on there. And then a lot of this is work in progress. So I think most everybody has talked to Dr. Howard Drew in the last week. I talked to him today. I think he's reached out to everybody. Is everybody working with him on the goals and all that? So, and I know he's been working with the two of you, right? So
Yes, we've consulted with him, and so I think our hope would be that if these are acceptable to the board, that we might entertain a motion so that these can inform the DIP and the CIP.
okay.
Yeah, this is, as a timeline, if you go back to the timeline of the work, October 17th, it's our hope, and the more time that we can have the campuses work on their campus improvement plans, the better. So that's why the importance and the urgency of this.
Okay. Any other questions? Take a motion. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the board approve the 2019-20 through 2023-24 school year board student outcome goals and constraints as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board student outcome goals and constraints as presented for the next 5 years. It's an easier way to say it. So, any further discussion?
Yeah, I just want to, go into two things. I want to thank Dr. Malerba and Mandy for the work and their work they've done to help us get here. And Dr. Howard's not here, but thank you to him. Hope he's watching. And I also want to just thank the board for putting in the time to really working on these. I think this is a huge step forward for our district. So I look for, and then also appreciate, I know my concern, and I know Annie was giving me a hard time earlier about popping a hammy. But I wanted to make sure that, again, that it sounds like that we've done the work. These are good stretch goals for us to look at, and that they're also attainable with their hard work. So thank you for crunching the numbers there as well. So.
Okay, this is in relation to no Ds, Fs going forward and all that. So that's, so all as long as we're focused on that too. And I know that this is a work in progress, right? There's going to be more
One more thing, sorry, I apologize.
That's right.
Yeah, I know the one that's not here is board constraints. I know you all talked to Dr. Howard, so hopefully at our October meeting we can adopt those to go along with this so it rounds out the whole thing.
Very good. Do you have a motion and a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 6-0. All right. We'll go to agenda item K2, discussion possible action to extend the board council contract. So as you all know, you got a copy of the contract. I hope you had a chance to read it and look through that. So our current attorneys, just for edification for the community, there's attorney Doug Ponick and his brother Marty De Leon work with us as the board. They represent the board. Ms. Carpenter represents not only the board but the district. So sometimes they're in sync. Sometimes they have different opinions on rulings, and that's normal. That's okay. But Mr. Ponick has been our counsel for the last year and a couple of months or so. And I think the deal was that we would look at the contract 1 year and go forward. This is a contract. It's not a binding contract for a year, if I understand right. If you have any comments, we can terminate at any time for any reason. But just for the public's
right. So a lawyer represents a client as long as the client is satisfied with the services. It would be unethical for a lawyer to bind himself or herself to a client if the client wishes to replace the lawyer. So this is a letter of engagement that essentially outlines the relationship and how we will be compensated for the work that we do.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ponick. Any other comments, questions about that? Yes. Oh, sorry. Did you have your light on? Mr. Matt.
I move that the Board of Trustees renew and extend the letter of engagement with Escamilla and Ponick as board counsel for an additional 1 year.
I second it.
You got a motion in 2 seconds. So to extend the contract for 1 additional year with Escamilla and Ponick. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure representing you, and you're an outstanding district, so it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and keeping us in line. I know that we test you sometimes, and you're very tactful in your response about board. Sometimes you'll say, board, I advise you to stay in bounds, and so thank you for that. So, all right, we'll go to the next agenda item, which is announcements, updates, requests for future agenda items. First to that, we'll just go to L1, Facilities and Finance Committee report. Ms. Weir.
So our committee, the Facilities and Facilities Committee met. We met on September 6th, and we reviewed a comprehensive list of unoccupied district properties. We had a couple of speakers come on that issue. We were also updated on 2018 bond projects by the different department directors. We started our discussion on capacities of district campuses. We'll continue that. And we also had the same discussion that PIB did about the next bond sale and the overview of the Capital Projects Fund. We have our next meeting scheduled for Friday, October 4th. We are going to start our capacity, our boundary discussions, but I know Mr. Worcester and his team we're going to say capacities, but and then we're also going to talk about the Westwood High School baseball and softball changing facility location, which is a safety issue for them since they don't have a secure location over on their baseball and softball fields during inclement weather. The one thing that I do want to let everybody know that's possibly watching and may want to come to our meeting is we are not meeting in this room on the 4th. We will be back over at the administration building since it is during the day on Friday, October 4th from noon to 2. And it will not be broadcast. It will be taped, though, and then put up on the website. So if you're interested in watching it in real time, you're going to have to come join us from noon to 2 on Friday, October 4th.
And you said the boundaries is a discussion that's coming up? You said
it is. We are
great.
We are going to start that.
Excellent. And
drum roll, please.
It's a difficult process, but I think it's, we at least have to look at it. So thank you. All right, policy, innovation, budget. Mr. Moses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our last meeting on September 16th, in addition to AE Local and BE Local 2 that we addressed tonight, we also heard the policy update 112 and 113 from TASB. As many of you know, they regularly will update policies based on law changes, based on rulings from TEA and otherwise, and so we heard a lot of that information, so I expect that to come before the board for a first reading in the near future. There are a number of policies in there, so I encourage you to go back and start reading them, so especially if you want to fall asleep. Great thing for that. And then moving forward, we'll continue to look at the Lone Star governance model and what policies there may need to be looked at, reviewed, adjusted if necessary. And then, we spent a lot of time the first few months, the committee talking about the policy. Hope that now we can talk a lot more also about innovation and what we can do as a district to continue to provide things for our students and for our campuses and our community. So any thoughts there, please share. We'd love to look at those if appropriate. And so, yeah, that's it. We don't have a next meeting set yet, but I'll get with Trustees Vesa and Gonzalez to iron that out.
Great. And kind of related to that, my comments update is we all went to TASB, the board. I think all of us were there. We overlapped. I saw the little card that said 100% attendance, and I should have filled that out because we overlapped at least a day there. I know that. Some of us came early and left early. Some came late and left late. But it was great going through the presentations and, some of the challenges we have here at Round Rock. You go sit in some of these presentations done by other school districts, and you look around and you think, what's going on in Houston right now with the flooding, what's going on past there. You go look at some of the districts that have shrinking enrollment, some that the property values are going down. Our biggest complaints here is traffic is bad, prices are going up, but there's a lot to be grateful for here. So that's one of the great things that you see when you go to these conferences. Walking through the exhibit hall, meeting all the vendors is interesting. If you walk around with the Round Rock ISD badge, they practically grab you and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about whatever. One that came up that was a great way was the food service. I don't have any complaints with Aramark, but there were some excellent little snacks that they gave. So I don't know what our rule is on looking at the food service contract, but I said I would pass it along. So Dr. Flores, I'm hereby passing it along to you. I don't have any complaint about Aramark, but I'm just saying, boy, there was some tasty food there. Anyway, it's just little snacks. Were
they on styrofoam?
No, there was one. It was actually, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thank you. There was one that was bamboo, and it was bamboo forks, bamboo little plates. So I can't remember which group it was, but anyway, I would love to thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate that little.
And can I jump on that bandwagon just a second? Because that was actually what I was going to maybe suggest, that I love when we have students come speak, and I know Wells Branch in particular, with their gardens, and they've done so much. And I know Pond Springs, we were part of that initial composting, and we had 3 trash cans, and the kids got really good at sorting everything. And maybe the policy committee could look, that could be policy and innovation together. But maybe take a look at that. And
I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad she brought that up because it was brought up before. Once we had talked about all the trays and all the trash in it. I think there was 1 or 2 campuses that looked at it, but as a district-wide, I think.
yeah, we did, and I know that there's different rules in Travis County and Austin and Round Rock, so that's going to be a problem. But I mean, I guess I just hope maybe y'all can start that conversation and.
Okay.
Yeah, and add solar panels to that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was also
that may be us.
last spring. The Student Advisory Board, that was a project, and they updated the board, so it was nice to see an elementary student pick up as well on that. And so I do think we need to look at that, especially if the number's accurate, over 5 million different products. I mean, and that may be a conservative number. According to Ryan Smith said that it's possibly more than that, so I don't know. I'll ask him where he got his figure, but talk about that.
So speaking of that real quick, and I want to belabor this, but solar panels, that comes up every few years. Mr. Worcester, I don't need to answer your question now. I don't want the question answered now, but in the future, if you'd come back, it used to be a 20-year payback period, and it wasn't feasible to put it on the roofs because it leaks. So just, I don't want to cross in the boundary, but maybe when you have your facility to say it's good on these 3 campuses, it wouldn't be suitable here, windmills, things like that. So.
I would be happy to look at that, and I'm quite versed in the alternative generation.
Great. All right, Ms. Bessa.
I know that we have our next workshop to continue our talk about safety and security on October 3rd, and just had expressed my desire to have at least some members of the Safety and Security Task Force come back and be as references, because when they came and gave their 6-hour presentation, it was a lot to take in, and I think as we digested it, we have questions now, and it would be advantageous for us to have them back, at least representatives of them back, to answer questions that maybe we've come up with since the last meeting.
I did talk to Lisa Moore. She was going to send out an email to the whole group and the leadership, and I would like for, again, to put that on the agenda where we do the present. They are available to come up and answer questions on whatever the topic was. So thank you for reminding me on that, bringing that up. Sure.
So we had gotten several emails as a board on opposition to the Marshal and Guardian program, and we heard a speaker today, and I'd like to just inform the public that the board has never advocated for those programs, and quite frankly, I could just speak for myself. I don't believe there's a whole lot of momentum behind those options. So I just wanted to dispel any rumors that any serious consideration was being given to marshals and guardians. It was just part of the presentation that was presented to us, and that's it.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Math. Board members, anything else?
Move adjourn.
Okay. It's
what? It's
9:38.